Welcome to Daily Review, your daily dose of literary exploration. We dive into books that spark curiosity and ignite growth. And while our passion often leads us to nonfiction reads that can empower and improve your life, really, no book is off limits. From gripping thrillers to insightful memoirs, compelling fiction to historical accounts, we're here to share and discuss all the interesting reads we discover. So tune in for your next great book idea. And today, we're unpacking a really powerful one, Jada Pinkett Smith's memoir, Worthy. It is a raw, unflinching look at her search for self-love while navigating the intense pressures of fame and a really painful past.
So, let's just dive right in. The book, it doesn't start with Hollywood glamour or a red carpet. Not at all. It drops you right at the edge of a cliff, emotionally speaking. This quote, man, it just captures that intense internal crisis she describes. That feeling where the gap between your public life and your private pain becomes this raging hellfire.
And that really brings us to the central question of the entire book. I mean, on the surface, she had everything anyone could ever want. So what was going on underneath? She frames her path to answering this in something she calls the heroine's journey. It's this idea of a conscious path from a complete breakdown to a breakthrough. From feeling utterly worthless to finally finding her worth.
Okay, so her heroine's journey kicks off right at rock bottom. This first part of the story is really all about that breakdown, a necessary, painful confrontation that, as she explains it, she just couldn't run from anymore.
The number 40, that's the trigger point. Her 40th birthday wasn't a celebration. She describes it as the moment that kicked off a complete mental and spiritual collapse. You know, despite living a life that most people would dream of, she found herself secretly, actively, planning her own death, a reality she kept hitting from absolutely everyone.
And this is where that disconnect becomes just so incredibly stark. I mean, you look at this list. On paper, it's the ultimate success story. A global movie star, half of a Hollywood power couple, famous kids, immense wealth. But the reality, her internal reality, was a constant battle with suicidal thoughts and this crushing feeling of being completely unworthy of love. That chasm is what pushed her right to the brink.
So, you have to ask, how did she get to this point? To really get the woman, you have to understand the child. And her origin story is this fascinating tale of two completely different competing worlds. Two Baltimores that ended up shaping her entire worldview.
In this slide, it just lays out those two opposing forces so clearly. On one side, you had her grandmother Marion's home, which she describes as this garden of order, spiritual lessons, and genuine love. But on the other side were the brutal streets of 1980s Baltimore, a place she calls Murdland, where it was all about survival, danger, and having a hustler's mentality just to get by.
So she carried this internal duality with her. You know, the sensitive artist and the tough-as-nails survivor, and that really defined her whole journey when she moved to Hollywood, a place she sometimes wryly calls Hollywoods.
Now, in this strange new world, one of her most important anchors was Tupac Shakur. She makes it very clear that their bond was deeply spiritual and platonic. She calls it a special kind of friendship that gave her the emotional safety and understanding she was searching for, something totally separate from romance.
But as she starts building this incredible life with Will Smith, a really fundamental conflict started to emerge. You see, for Will, fame was this amazing tool to spread joy and positivity. But for Jada, it became what she calls a gilded cage. It was a source of constant pressure, where she felt like she was always performing, always playing a role, and slowly, surely losing touch with her true self.
This was her road of trials, a term from mythology that fits perfectly here. She was fighting to stay authentic, getting called rough around the edges for her Baltimore accent, getting intense backlash for her heavy metal band. But maybe the biggest battle was the one happening inside, as she felt her own identity just kind of dissolving into the roles of wife and mother to this global superstar family. Well, as you can imagine, the pressure of keeping up that perfect image, of being the strong matriarch for everyone else while feeling totally lost herself, it just became too much. The gilded cage she felt so trapped in finally started to crack.
And this all led to that now infamous public moment. She calls it an entanglement, not an affair. And her definition is key here. She sees it as a misstep that happened while she and Will were actually separated. An interaction, in her words, that lacked a spiritual foundation
and just ended up adding to all the turmoil she was already feeling.
This public crisis basically forced her into a very private reckoning. In total desperation, she turned to the plant medicine ayahuasca. The way she describes the ceremony is like a literal descent into her own personal abyss. She was forced to face these evil voices telling her to kill herself, and she realized the only way out wasn't to fight them, but to just completely surrender.
And right there, in that moment of complete surrender, she experienced this profound spiritual rebirth. She writes that for the very first time, she felt an unconditional love for herself. Not as Jada the star or the wife or the mother, but as a fundamental, beloved child of the divine. And that, right there, was the core realization that changed absolutely everything.
So this newfound feeling of inherent worthiness, that was the elixir, the prize she brought back from that dark journey. It became the foundation for her to start forging a brand new identity, one that wasn't defined by anybody else but herself.
What she came to understand was that real, true worthiness could never be found in box office numbers, or public praise, or even in her own family. It was something she had to build herself, from the inside out, piece by piece, right from the ashes of her old self.
She describes this process so beautifully, like she's gathering jewels to forge her very own crown. And each jewel here represents a piece of wisdom she had to fight for, forgiving herself, being radically honest, setting boundaries. And maybe most important of all, reclaiming the right to tell her own story in her own words.
And this really is the ultimate point of Worthy. The whole fairy tale idea of being saved by a prince, it's completely dismantled. And in its place is this powerful story of self-salvation. It's about finding your power not in some external kingdom, but in the one you build inside yourself.
And so her story leaves us with this final, really powerful question. It takes her personal heroine's journey and turns it into a mirror for all of us, asking us to think about where we find our own worth and what jewels we might be able to gather from our own trials to forge a crown of our own. Thank you so much for tuning in to Daily Review. We truly appreciate you joining us for your daily dose of literary exploration. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to share these amazing books with you. If you're enjoying what you hear, please consider taking a moment to subscribe, rate, like, and comment on any of the platforms you're listening from. This really helps support our channel and allows us to get better and bring you even more great content. And if today's review sparked your interest and you're ready to dive into a copy of the book, please consider using the link in our description to make your purchase. Not only does it make it easy for you to get your hands on the book, but it also directly supports our channel and the author, allowing us to keep bringing you more great content. Thanks again for being a part of the Daily Review community.